Hello, my name is Carrie Wood, and I'd like to welcome you to A Writer's Journey. I am so glad to be able to share our very own Steve Grossman with you today. He's here to talk about his newly released book, Palimony. So without further ado, welcome Steve. Hey, Steve, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I have an actual book out in the universe, so it's a novelty, and I'm really enjoying it.
Yes, yes, yes. And I'm so excited because I actually received my copy yesterday. So, yes, and look, look, look. See, he even signed it for me. So I was pretty excited. I get to hold it in my hands. It's been kind of fun because I've shared a little bit in Steve's journey over the last couple years. And so to be able to hold it in my hands is phenomenal. And we are so excited for you.
Thanks.
Yay. Your dedication in your book.
Hmm.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about how your dad inspired you to be a writer and how you brought that dream to fruition?
Well, he always had the writing bug inside him, and he's been gone for over 30 years, but had a great sense of humor. There's always been this feeling like it was a missed opportunity for him, that he could have been a writer had he applied himself, but it was always, doing what he thought was the most responsible thing to do. And rolling the dice for a writing career didn't appear as if that was the safe route. And, he dabbled in PTA plays. My cousin was an aspiring playwright. I remember when I was in high school, he would help her out a little bit on our kitchen table. And, he really seemed to come alive when he was doing that kind of stuff. So um, I always felt like it was a missed opportunity. And I wanted to keep that dream alive and feel like I could, in some ways, connect with him from beyond by getting a book out into the universe. So it was really the inspiration for, that those writer times when you want to keep going, and uh, all of the negativity and rejection that's kind of baked into the writing process. All the frustration and such can get to you, but if you have a sort of north star, you'll keep going even in those difficult times. So that was my dad.
Perfect. And that's really important for those moments when we need to dig deep because writing is a solitary business. And so it's
Hmm.
real important to be able to have a really strong why that you can fall back on. So now
Yes.
we haven't even gotten to your book yet,
Okay.
but your acknowledgement, it's pretty strong itself. So what makes your writing group stand out from most others?
Writing, as you said, is a solitary business, and it's tough to do it alone. And sometimes, if you ask for feedback from your relatives, your siblings, or your next door neighbors or your best friends, they may not have that writer's perspective, and they may not give you good advice. They may just be looking to cheer you up, and that's sometimes not what you need. So, well, again, as you said, the writing business is very solitary. You're ultimately there with your keyboard and trying to pump out some words and make the story make sense. But it helps a lot to have camaraderie, people you can bounce ideas off, and particularly in the group. I'll give you a couple of for instances. Um, a lot of the book takes place in Australia, particularly at the end, and we had 4 or 5 members I was friends with. So I'm like, does this dialogue sound authentic, or what would an Australian say in this particular situation? The book ends in a kind of far-flung resort in Western Australia that not a lot of people have heard of. And one of the members from Perth just said, "Oh, I've been there several times, and this is the main street. No, it doesn't have a marina, but it does have such and such." And those are the kind of things you can get authenticity from. And then having people that are struggling with writing, that know all the maxims and all the rules, be able to read as a beta reader, but apply those to your book. Uh, had a couple of excesses. Too much backstory was one of my writer flaws, and I kind of worked on that from some of the feedback I got. And so it's a great process. And so yeah, the group has been a great source of inspiration. getting to see members get their books out into the world and the journey. We just had someone that had their book optioned into a movie or TV treatment, and this was someone that stuck to their guns. That they told him to make a fictional book out of his memoir, and he said no, it's got to be a memoir, and he had that internal fortitude to just keep with his vision. So it gave me the strength to go on, and another source of motivation that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not an oncoming train. So
That's a good thing. So,
yeah.
Steve, I love your cover. There are so many little caveats to the story here. Who designed this for you?
I actually, way back when, saw a picture of a guy kind of leaning forward and acting flirty with a girl, and she had that kind of demure, coquettish smile, but his fingers were crossed behind his back. And I thought that has so much connection to the plot. And then a big fan of Carl Hyacin. His covers always seem to be very bright, yellowish, and always seem to have like cartoonish characters. And I'm like, that was the vibe I was looking for. So I think if you look at it, you're like, oh, this guy's up to something. She looks like she's unsuspecting of what he's got up his sleeve. And I just thought it spoke to the story a bunch. So the publisher had a great cartoonist. We went back and forth a few times, and she sort of nailed it. So I was really happy with the result.
So,
Okay.
Steve,
The
what
cover?
genre is Palimony?
It would be commercial fiction. It's got an element of rom-com in it, and a little bit of social satire. Along the lines of a bonfire on the vanities kind of thing. But generally fun romantic romp with a bunch of social satire mixed in. So hopefully it has, touches on some serious things, but in a comical way.
Definitely. Definitely the comedy and the satire definitely comes through. So, how did you come up with the name Palimony?
It's a buddy of mine who went through a divorce from hell. He literally sold the house he was living in to jointly buy one with what he thought was his forever wife. She was an attorney. She left him for another woman, and the cash from the proceeds of the house was parked in a joint account. And lo and behold, one day it just disappeared, as did she. So we were talking together at an insurance convention, and I told him the premise of the book because he had been going through a whole divorce thing. And he's like, well, they're pals. How about Palimony? And I'm like, nailed it, done. So hence the name.
Perfect. So, tell me, Ross and Dave, wow. Now, they are so different, but yet they're going through a similar experience. So, would you mind telling us a little about each of them and their background?
Okay. So they're in the book. I think I said they're global travelers that arrived at the same point by walking in opposite directions. So they're both mid-level VP kind of executives that are up to their eyeballs in alimony. Ross married a stay-at-home demanding narcissist, and his whole life is revolved around buzzing around her needs, wants, and Michigas, as we like to say in the old country. And Dave was a pharmaceutical rising star, and his father-in-law owned a small generic manufacturer of pharmaceuticals, and he thought he'd be the son-in-law, and it was a true family business. His wife was also an attorney, but she didn't want any part of the whole family thing because she wanted to make her mark in the business world on her own. So she's like a type A driven, and here he is bringing all this big company knowledge to this smaller firm. And then lo and behold, they get divorced. So he's out on his butt, and he's got to take a job, at half the pay he was at before, and just as a kind of stopgap measure. So he's up to his eyeballs again.
So, Dave.
Oh, so yeah. So he's a pharmaceutical rep. Lo and behold, he and his wife get divorced. Part of the family business contract when you're a son-in-law, if you get divorced, you're also divorced from your job. So the two have like photographic negatives of each other. Dave actually got along great with his mother-in-law, and his father-in-law was kind of like the driving businessman. Whereas on Ross, on the other hand, his mother-in-law was kind of like his nemesis, and she just henpecked the heck out of her husband. So that was how his wife sort of modeled marriage behavior. So she thought her job was to get her husband in line and train him like he was a labradoodle, and you know, ultimately it didn't work out so great.
I love it. So, Steve, tell us, have you been divorced? And did you go, if you have, did you go through anything similar that these men go through in your book?
Well, I had a nice sized house, and then I was back in a starter apartment, and watching people, corporate transfers, waiting for their houses to get completed, or a bunch of millennials just at their first job. And there was that whole dichotomy of the life I used to have versus the life I have now. And then we're 19 and 14 at the time, and so obviously I was worried about how the thing would affect them and how to maintain my relationship with them as a parent as well. So that weighed into things. So yeah, went through much the same things as some of the characters in the book in terms of a big adjustment to their standard of living and their life, and as opposed to a house with always people around. It was just me for a while till my son moved in, and that was relatable.
Ah, so is there a certain character that you relate more to than others in your book?
Uh, Probably Ross, because his lifestyle changed so dramatically, and his self-esteem took a tumble. Um, I took martial arts for a while. I found that a great stress relief with everything going on. So it doesn't parallel my life exactly. It's obviously a work of fiction, but there were things that certainly I could relate to.
Vicky sounds like a total sweetheart. What inspired you to have these two meet?
I wanted something in there that kind of, he felt his luck changing, and I felt like he needed a kind of advisor to sort of help him through the situation, someone he can bounce ideas off. I didn't want it to be one-sided in terms of the male characters were the ones having problems, divorce, or relationships ending. So it was an opportunity to integrate that into the story. And being a business traveler, I'd see people, particularly when I go to LA and stay near an airport. There were always flight crews from all over, and they looked so crisp even after 20-hour flights from New Zealand or the Orient. And I just kind of wondered what their lives are like, and what would happen if you met someone. And uh, relationships and how you meet are sometimes not stationary. In other words, you're at a different place in your life, and sometimes the perfect person for you to interact with at that particular time depends on what they're going through and what you're going through. And then there's always a lot of times an archetypal character that's the person from far away that just is able to impart wisdom, that they're sort of different from you. So that was going on. And as I thought of it, I wanted to create a really fun, gregarious character that kind of understood Ross, where he didn't feel like his self-esteem was always in the toilet when he was with her, but he really could kind of blossom as a result of his long-term email, mostly relationship with her. And she was a prankster that kind of brought out his fun side too, which is good
So,
at the
Steve,
time.
tell us, who are Julie and Stephanie? And can you give us a hint at their personalities?
Um, Julie is very competitive. She's driven. She, as a woman trying to make her way in the world, like a lot of women, feels like she has to do things better than men. Like someone said of Ginger Rogers, she has to do everything Fred Astaire says, but just backwards in high heels. And as a result, she didn't want to be part of the family business. She wanted to have her own kind of mark on life as an attorney. She gets involved in martial arts because she has that competitive streak after being a tennis player in high school. And then she sort of realizes through their relationship that it's not that healthy to be on all the time and competing all the time. So in that sense, Ross was kind of a good moderating influence on her. Stephanie is more of a petulant narcissist. She just wants the world to revolve around her. Projects a lot of her anxieties and insecurities out into the world on other people. She kind of feels like she can only feel tall when she chops other people's heads off. So there's, people that are unhappy with themselves, that decide they don't want the rest of the world to be any less unhappy than they are, and can only feel tall when they're chopping other people's heads off. So that's basically her life in a nutshell. She's always finding perceived slights and people that have done her wrong and things that weren't fair to her, and as a result is kind of a toxic influence on Ross's life, and he eventually feels like he's lost his personality in servitude to her. And you know as a result, with some clarity from being apart, he realizes that he can be a different person. He doesn't have to perennially buzz around her and revolve around her.
Would you like to read an excerpt from your book to us?
Sure. Uh,
Oh, how exciting.
Becky, what the hell just happened? Ross leaned forward, hands clasped in front of him. This is blowing up, isn't it? It's going nuclear. He'd been prepping for this day for more than a month. Stoic and resolute, Ross was a reluctant warrior, ready to tilt the settlement towards a fair equilibrium. His ex would insist on 100% of everything, and Eunice had her believing it was possible. Just hours earlier, Ross had stood outside, a disheveled mess, sipping the remains of his lukewarm coffee. Before entering the lion's den, he repeated his mantra, "You got this." He didn't sound convincing, even to himself. Just outside, Ross spotted Becky, struggling to walk under the weight of 2 accordion files. "Oh, they're just for effect," she said. "I have client files in there. Let Eunice think I have mountains of depositions. While the mediator meets with them, I can work on other clients and save you food dollars and billable time." Becky seemed to look out for Ross, although at $350 an hour, she was a fairly expensive guardian angel. Genteel yet plucky, Ross admired her intellect and guidance, and she seemed uniquely qualified to rebuff the onslaught of his soon-to-be ex-wife's man-eating attorney. Becky and Ross waited in a gigantic conference room with a hickory table that could have seated 30. It was well crafted, an exquisite piece carved during the heyday of North Carolina's furniture boom. Ross wondered whether he too had a heyday that had come and gone. Ross caught himself tapping his fingers and stopped. No nerves before the opposition. He hoped to leave today with a smidgen of hope. All his chips were on Becky. Fumbling noises emanated from the hallway as Eunice's sausage-like fingers gripped the doorknob. She was large and tall, as expected, with a broad frame. She wasn't so much obese, but possessive of large girth and the warmth of your average headstone. "I'm Eunice Burbank, and I'm representing Stephanie." "Who else would she be?" "Ross, but you can call me Dickhead if you prefer," Ross said, using the nickname Stephanie said was her attorney's preferred moniker for him. Stephanie was the first to laugh. Miles, the mediator, chuckled, as did Becky. At the retort, Ross had been practicing in the mirror for almost a week. Eunice's dehumanizing nicknames were legendary in Charlotte legal circles. His sarcasm disarmed the moment. Eunice had to follow her client's lead and acted amused, but she wasn't. Ross drew first blood. Becky gave a nod as if to express her pride, but it was a Pyrrhic victory, as Eunice proved as headstrong. Eunice Burbank, Esquire, was 6'2" with a chiseled, permanent scowl. Her well-oiled "make the bastard pay" pitch resonated with bitter housewives, intent on revenge rather than a just settlement. She focused on those that did not work, referring to them as displaced homemakers, like they were refugees from the Congo or war-torn Iraq. And her MO was to maximize the settlement by arguing for rehabilitative alimony, the maximum allowable. Before he even met her, Ross dreamt of Eunice as Godzilla, a towering, fire-breathing figure with tiny T-Rex arms causing cataclysmic destruction to all Ross worked so hard to achieve. Anything of value was in her gun sights. There was a house, some savings, and a few possessions. But Eunice went to war as if she were a prosecutor in search of laundered money. From what he gleaned, her reputation was not for her sharp legal mind, but endless, petty. After searching for weeks and unsuccessfully interviewing two attorneys who flat out refused to deal with the curmudgeonly Eunice, he found Becky. Rebecca Harrington worked for Hayden, Piper, and McCorkle, one of the city's top firms. A handsome woman, she cut a striking figure with her flowing salt and pepper hair, tailored suit, and stylish bifocals. Becky Harrington seemed the answer to his prayers. She had a keen intellect disguised under a syrupy southern veneer. Her barbed comments to opposing counsel sounded as if she'd wrapped them in velvet. Smartly dressed yet conservative, Becky was in her late 40s, her graying hair conveying wisdom, professionalism, and a certain contentment with her station in life. Petty squabbles that left the meter running on billable hours. According to Becky, when the dust settled, her clients thought of her in one of two ways: as a fierce advocate who went to war for them, or a bombastic grifter whose actions left a mountain of legal bills and a little in the way of assets to split. Either way, Eunice got paid.
Yeah.
After,
So tell us, Steve, how can people reach out to you?
Steve Grossman, author at Gmail. I'm happy to answer any email at this point. Steve Grossman, author, Facebook. I'm happy to respond. Steve Grossman, author, www, my website. Interact.
So Steve, tell us, when does Palimony come out so that we can purchase it, and where do we purchase it?
It is on Amazon. If you want to make sure Jeff Bezos has enough money, you can purchase it there starting May 18th, and also Barnes and Noble on the same date. So both are available, and like I said, I'm eager to see how it does on that opening day. From what I gather, if a lot of people buy it when it first comes out, it'll become more visible. So hopefully this thing can grow.
Perfect. And what formats will it be available in?
Hardcover, paperback, and Kindle, and then we'll see how things go, and we may try an audio version, and eventually translate it into 179 languages. But first things first, so you got three options: Kindle, hardcover, and also paperback.
Okay, good. So can you tell us a little bit about White Bird Publications, who is the publisher of your novel, Palimony, and how you found them?
Kind of interesting story. I queried an agent, looked up what their likes and dislikes and types of books were, and I got back a rejection, but a nice note. It said, I liked your pages, but we only do crime novels now. But I tell you what, it was very much a movie that was playing in my head, and I've got a screenwriter, and I think he'd be perfect with you to collaborate on something. He's from New Jersey originally, lives in Pennsylvania now. He doesn't charge Hollywood prices. So I called the guy, and we talked for quite a while, and he helped me learn some of the ins and outs of screenwriting. But he said that he puts his books through a small press in Austin, Texas. The woman was wonderful. She, sicked three editors on me, and they all put in their 2 cents, and they, she liked the query that I wrote, and she liked the pages. She thought it would do well. Worked on the cover, got her artist to do that. So I've been really happy. I feel like it's a good home. I'm getting personalized attention. She's very professional, and looking forward to a good collaboration.
Great. So what did you like most about the writing process?
There's really two parts. The first part is when you're in one of those creative, productive zones and you're sitting in the chair and you're just pecking away at your keyboards, and your time and space just kind of disappear, and you're actually in the novel, and all the voices or characters in your head just keep talking to you, and you're like, let me write this down, let me keep going. And there's a tree right outside my office where I guess an owl or a family of owls lives. And a lot of times I'd be writing, and it's like, oh my God, it must be like 5 o'clock. I'd hear the owls doing their thing when they wake up way too early. And I would have, had written 30 pages. The other thing, which is super enjoyable to me, is when someone just connects with the characters. They connect with the novel and some of the ups and downs and plot twists. There was one lady in our group who kept texting paragraphs of the book to her husband saying, "This is exactly like your ex-wife. I can't believe it. It's like, how does he know all this stuff?" And it's, it's sort of like an archetypal character, but it resonated with people. To me, when someone connects with these imaginary people you have writing the story with you in your head, and feels like to them they're real, and they enjoy the story, and the characters seem like they're actual people that could exist in the real world, not just the writer's imagination. That to me is a great joy. It means you've done your job as a writer, that it resonates with other people.
Definitely. So would you write another book?
I am writing another book, and I don't think I could not write books anymore, because I just think like I have to have something new. I mean, I obviously want to work on the screenplay of this, get a little footprint out in the real world, and market it when Palimony exists in the virtual world of the internet in a big way. But yeah, I'm always thinking of plots for books. I've got 4 ideas now. I'm working on the second book. I'm kind of deep into it, I think. Just trying to carve out some time to do it. But yeah, I've enjoyed it. I think I can do another one a lot more efficiently.
Okay, Steve. So tell us, what are you working on right now?
It's a novel. It's got a female protagonist and a male antagonist. It's called Espionage. It's about
Ooh.
a divorced suburban Charlotte housewife that, after dropping her kids off from carpooling and little league and dance lessons and violin lessons, wakes up in a black ops prison in the middle of Kyrgyzstan, and she has no idea why, and ultimately realizes her ex-husband's dabbling in spycraft with, well, who he thinks are mobsters, but they're really part of this international group trying to take down the US banking system. So she has to become an inadvertent 007 using just her Jersey girl street smarts, and basically prevent worldwide catastrophe while maintaining her job as a dental hygienist and carpooling her kids all around. So I kind of enjoyed it. I'm having fun with it. I think I can throw a lot of plot twists. Think Mona Lisa Vito from My Cousin Vinny meets James Bond,
Ooh,
so, or Jack Ryan if you're a big fan of the that series with Tom Clancy.
very cool. So is there any part of the writing process that you found more intriguing than others?
Oh, the book writing process.
Hmm.
Just having all those queries out in the world and checking your emails like you were a lab rat in a crack experiment. Seeing what whether someone asked for pages, or whether they had some suggestions, or whether they finished reading the novel, etc. The whole marketing process, the whole behind the scenes thing of the publishing industry is kind of interesting when you look at it from the perspective of a writer. It's something authors don't often think about, and that's one of the beauties of the group that we're in, is that your book's never going to really get out in the world unless you understand those things. And most writers just want to write. Most musicians just want to play their instruments, and they don't think of the business side of it. So it was good to get that education.
So, Mr. Grossman, can you tell us which part from the beginning of writing your manuscript up until the point where it's being published was the most difficult part of this whole entire process for you?
Um, I guess the first part is the editing. Like I said, I didn't know much about the sausage making a book, so I wrote 1.5 books worth of words and had to chop a whole bunch of them that I had grown attached to. And editing your own stuff is not for the weak. It's kind of like taking out your own appendix. You could do it, but it's going to be way painful, and you're probably not going to do as good of a job as an editor might. So that part was ultimately very helpful in making it a leaner and a cleaner book, but it wasn't fun at the time, searching for paragraphs and sentences to get rid of and rearranging plot twists. So that you cut and you hope you don't hit an artery and then you have to rearrange the whole thing. So that part was at times frustrating, and really made me appreciate the value that an editor brings to the table. There's only so much of that you can do yourself. And like I said, I think the next go round, I won't have so much extra to get rid of. But for this book, it took quite a bit of rearranging.
Very cool.
It's like
So go ahead.
Rubik's Cube. It's like a Rubik's Cube. You almost have it done, and then you twist it a little bit, and then it's worse off, and then you got to go back to just get back to where you came from, and then you're still not there. So thank God for editors. I truly appreciate them.
Yes, definitely. So do you have any advice for someone who wants to write a book?
First, commit yourself to getting it done through thick and thin. Take some online writing courses. There's some great ones out there that teach you the process and characters and how to build tension and all that sort of stuff. And get a writing group. Get people that you can rely on. Pitch to Publish has been like a family. Your group, A Writer's Journey, has been amazing. There's people you can draw upon that may know something that you're unfamiliar with, how to speak in an Australian dialect, or how to find out about spycraft or cybersecurity, or all kinds of things that I've taken from other people that had different expertise. And then you get eyeballs on your book that are not your cousin or your fraternity brother, but they're actual people that know the process and know all the writer's rules and maxims. So that can be invaluable. Yeah. So also, Charlotte, there's people I know that write, and I'm sure every city has them. And now that Corona's kind of on the canvas and hopefully on the way out, meet at a coffee shop every so often, or swap pages. Make the business less lonely, and help someone else out with writing. And in the process, you'll learn how to look at your own pages with the eyes of an editor or a publisher. You'll realize maybe some of your ticks and excesses that you do, and become a better writer.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve, for doing this with us. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm just so thrilled for you, as so many of us that are watching this are thrilled for you, that this is finally, Palimony is becoming a reality that you get to hold in your hand and share with lots of other people that are out there. So please go to Amazon, go to Barnes and Noble, and download Palimony. Put it on, it's coming out on May 17th. So make sure that you put your reservation in for it. And thank you so much again, Steve. And thank you to Whitebird Publications for publishing his book. And thank you to all of you for joining in. Steve is going to check the comments. So please, if you have any questions for Steve, put them in the comments. He will be checking them over the next week or two and answering any of those. You can see all the different ways to contact him, whether it's through email, social media, what have you. Please feel free to do that. And remember, only you can make it a great day.